We live in a time where speed is everything. We want faster results, quicker wins, instant gratification. We're drawn to headlines that promise transformation in a day, success in a night, mastery in a week. And we've all seen those titles: Get Rich in 7 days, Six-Pack Abs in 3, Confidence Overnight. Most of us scroll right past them, a little skeptical, a little curious, maybe even a little bitter, that such claims feel so out of reach. But what if I told you that becoming powerful and unrecognizable in 1 week is not a fantasy? What if it's possible? Not because of a gimmick, not because of magic, but because of what happens when we get brutally honest, radically focused, and completely clear about why we do what we do. Let's talk about power for a second. Real power. Not dominance, not control, not ego, but the kind of power that radiates from someone who knows exactly who they are, the kind of power that isn't loud but undeniable, the kind of power that shifts a room not because someone is trying to take up space, but because they simply are. We've all met that person, haven't we? The one who walks in and doesn't need to say much, yet somehow everyone feels their presence. That kind of power isn't built by accident. It's not the result of a lucky break or superior genes or perfect timing. It's a decision, it's a mindset, it's a relentless commitment to becoming the version of you that you know you're meant to be. And sometimes, believe it or not, it can start in just 1 week. But here's the catch. The goal isn't to do more, it's to be more. Most people approach growth by asking, what can I add to my routine? What hacks can I use? What extra steps can I pile on? But transformation isn't about stacking more on top. It's about stripping away what doesn't belong. It's about subtracting the layers that no longer serve you so the core of who you really are can finally come through. In just 1 week, you can become unrecognizable, not to others necessarily, but to the old version of yourself. You can wake up 7 days from now, look in the mirror and say, I don't even recognize that person I used to be. That's the win. That's the power. That's the shift. It starts with one question: why? Why do you want this change? Why does it matter? Why now? The truth is, most of us aren't stuck because we're lazy. We're stuck because we've lost sight of our why. We've bought into someone else's version of success, and we're chasing goals that don't even belong to us. We've said yes to expectations that were never ours to carry, and so we hustle and grind and push, and then wonder why we feel empty. When you know your why, you stop chasing, you start choosing. You choose what to focus on, you choose how to show up, you choose what matters, and in that choice you reclaim your power. So here's what happens in a week, not when you push harder, but when you become intentional. You wake up on day 1 and decide, this week is different, not because the calendar says so, not because of a motivational video, but because you are done pretending. You are done playing small. You are done waiting for permission. You wake up and say, this week, I will act like the person I'm becoming, not the person I've been. And that changes everything. Because the future you, the powerful, confident, unshakable version of you, they don't scroll endlessly before bed. They don't spend hours worrying about what other people think. They don't let fear drive the wheel. They move with purpose. They speak with conviction. They operate from clarity. So you start showing up like that person. Not next year, not next month, this week, today. And it feels awkward, it feels unnatural, it feels fake, but let me tell you something that might surprise you. Every authentic version of you once felt fake. Every stage of growth, every layer of evolution feels like pretending at first because you're stepping into unfamiliar territory. But just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean it's inauthentic. It just means it's new. So you lean in. You do the uncomfortable things. You speak up when it's easier to stay quiet. You say no when your default is yes. You sit with your discomfort instead of numbing it. You show up on time. You keep promises to yourself. You do the hard thing first before the excuses can catch up. And each small decision, each courageous choice, each moment of alignment, it stacks, it compounds. And by the end of the week, you start to feel different. You carry yourself differently. People notice. They can't quite put their finger on it, but something's shifted. And that's the moment you realize you're not the same person. But that transformation didn't happen because you found a new trick. It happened because you returned to something old, something deep, something true. You stopped asking, what should I do? And started asking, who do I want to be? Because when you focus on being, doing takes care of itself. You want to become powerful? Stop chasing power. Start owning your truth. You want to become unrecognizable. Start shedding the identities that were never yours to begin with. Stop trying to impress and start trying to express. There's a reason the most powerful people are often the most still. It's because they're not at war with themselves. They've accepted who they are and they've aligned their actions accordingly. That kind of power doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need noise. It just is. And it's available to you, not in some distant future, not after another course, another raise, another approval, right now. So let's stop asking how fast we can change. Let's ask how deeply, because when the shift is deep, the results come fast, not because you're racing, but because you're aligned, and alignment moves mountains. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who had spent most of his adult life in survival mode. Wake up, get through the day, pay the bills, smile when you're supposed to smile, numb out when the weight gets too heavy. From the outside, he looked like he had it together. Inside, he was dying. One night, he sat down with himself and asked a question he hadn't asked in years. Is this it? And the silence that followed was louder than any answer. So he made a decision. He didn't know how to change everything. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew he couldn't go one more week like this. So he gave himself 7 days. 7 days of radical honesty, 7 days of saying no to what drained him, 7 days of choosing differently, 7 days of showing up like the version of him he'd buried. On day 1, he felt ridiculous. On day 3, he felt tired. On day 5, he felt scared. But on day 7, he felt something else. He felt himself. And that was the most powerful thing he'd felt in years. He wasn't done growing. He hadn't arrived, but he was no longer lost. And that made him unrecognizable, not because his face had changed, but because his fire was back. That story isn't rare, it's not dramatic, it's real, and it can be your story. All it takes is 1 week of showing up like the version of you that scares you a little, the version of you that feels like too much, too bold, too honest, the version that's been whispering all this time, let me out. So don't wait. Don't plan for a future you're not willing to act on now. Don't wait to feel ready, you won't. Don't wait for confidence, it comes after, not before. Don't wait for proof, you are the proof. Start this week, start today, make the phone call, say the things, set the boundary, begin the work, get quiet, get clear, get honest. You can become powerful in a week, not by pretending to be someone else, but by fully becoming who you already are beneath the noise. You can become unrecognizable, not to the world, but to your past self. The one who played it safe, who shrunk, who waited. You don't need more time, you just need more truth. And the willingness to act on it. Let this be the week, the one where everything shifts. Not because the world changes, but because you do. Because the truth is, your life doesn't change when the world suddenly opens its doors for you. Your life changes when you stop standing in your own way, when you stop negotiating with your fear, when you stop letting your past mistakes vote on your future decisions. That's when things begin to move. That's when momentum builds. And sometimes that shift isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small, seemingly insignificant moments. The morning you choose to get out of bed when you don't want it to. The instant you breathe through your anxiety instead of running from it. The moment you speak up when your voice shakes. It's in these moments, quiet, gritty, personal, that you begin to rebuild. That's how you become powerful. Because power isn't volume, it's alignment. Power is knowing who you are, what you stand for, and where you're going, and then having the courage to show up in accordance with that every single day, especially on the days when no one is watching, especially when it's not easy. This isn't about becoming better than anyone else. It's not about proving your worth or showcasing how disciplined or motivated you are. It's about deciding that the old version of you, the one who tolerated things that weren't okay, the one who kept quiet out of fear, the one who let days blur together in autopilot, doesn't get to drive the car anymore. For 1 week, try something radical. Show up like you matter, not to impress, not to achieve, but simply because you've decided to stop hiding. That means waking up and asking yourself, if I already were that version of myself I dream about, what would I do today? And then doing exactly that. Even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. You see, the discomfort is the proof. The resistance is confirmation that you're stepping into something new. Growth doesn't feel good in real time. It feels awkward, it feels clunky, it feels scary. And that's the point. If you felt confident doing it, It would mean you've already been there. You can't become unrecognizable by doing what's familiar. You get there by moving in the direction of your future self, not your former one. That means breaking cycles, not just talking about them. That means changing your tone when you speak to yourself. That means holding boundaries even when it costs you comfort. That means choosing rest when your value has been tied to how productive you are. That means being honest with people in your life even when honesty disrupts the peace. Let me ask you something. How many times have you kept yourself small just to avoid discomfort? How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How many times have you smiled through situations that chipped away at your soul? What would happen if for just 1 week you refused to abandon yourself? That's what becoming powerful looks like. It's not about how loud you can be, it's about how honest you're willing to be. And honesty, real, raw, unfiltered honesty, that is terrifying. But it's also magnetic because it strips away everything artificial. And when you start living from that place, everything around you begins to reorganize. Relationships change, habits shift, your environment either rises to meet you or you outgrow it. People might not recognize you, some will pull away, others will challenge your change, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth reminds them of what they haven't faced. And that's okay. Growth is clarifying. It reveals what's real. It filters what's aligned. It invites in what resonates. You'll find that when you start becoming who you really are, you won't fit into the same places you used to, but you'll also find new spaces. People who see you clearly, not because you've performed your way into their favor, but because you've allowed yourself to be seen. Not everyone deserves to witness your becoming. Not everyone will clap for it. That's not your job. Your job is to keep becoming anyway. This is where real strength comes in. Can you hold your new standard when the applause dies down? Can you honor your evolution when it's inconvenient, when it makes people uncomfortable, when it costs you something? Because it will. It will cost you your comfort zone. It will cost you shallow conversations. It will cost you the convenience of being liked by everyone. But what you gain in return is priceless integrity, clarity, purpose, and peace that doesn't come from the outside. And when you carry that kind of peace, you walk differently, you talk differently, you listen differently, not from defensiveness or insecurity, but from groundedness. You don't have to prove anything because who you are speaks louder than anything you could say. That's power. This isn't about ego, this is about energy. Power is the ability to affect your environment without forcing it. It's showing up with such clarity that people naturally shift in your presence. Not because you demanded it, but because alignment is contagious. And if you do this for a week, just one intentional week of being deeply honest, incredibly focused, and unapologetically aligned, you'll feel it. You'll feel the ground under your feet change. You'll feel your internal compass sharpen. You'll start to hear your own voice again. You'll remember who you were before you learned to doubt it. Because here's the truth. The version of you you're trying to become isn't found in some distant future. It's already within you, waiting for you to clear out the noise, waiting for you to stop dimming your light, waiting for you to stop making excuses for playing small. You don't need to become something else. You need to return to something ancient, something primal, something real, your essence. And from that place, your actions start to look different. You move with less urgency, but more purpose. You say less, but your words carry weight. You don't hustle for attention, you attract it through authenticity. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth because your presence does the talking. This isn't fantasy, this is available right now. Not when your schedule clears up, not when life is less chaotic, not when you feel ready, because the truth is you may never feel ready, but you are already capable. And you might be thinking, what if I try and nothing changes? But let me offer a reframe. What if everything does? What if at the end of this week you realized you were never as far from the life you wanted as you thought? What if the only thing standing between you and that life was the belief that you couldn't access it? Belief is the gatekeeper. Action is the key. You don't need a guarantee that everything will work out. You need the courage to show up anyway, to take the first step, not because the whole path is clear, but because the next step is. So you take it, you take that step, and then another and another. You keep showing up. You keep choosing alignment over approval. You keep picking depth over speed. You keep choosing purpose over performance. And slowly then all at once, your life begins to reflect the truth you've been carrying all along. 1 week of this kind of intentional living won't solve everything, but it will shift something fundamental. And once you feel that shift, you can't go back. You won't want to, because you'll have tasted something real, your own power, not the kind that demands, the kind that declares, the kind that doesn't rise from status or image, but from knowing yourself intimately and choosing to live in alignment with that knowledge. That kind of power doesn't fade, it deepens, it grows, it expands. So start now, not perfectly, not completely, just honestly. Be the version of you that stops negotiating with fear. Be the version of you that honors what matters, even if no one else sees it yet. Be the version of you that walks into the room and doesn't shrink, doesn't perform, just stands in quiet truth. The world doesn't need more people pretending to have it all together. It needs more people grounded in their purpose, clear in their values, and willing to live like it matters. That could be you. That is you, underneath the noise, beneath the stories, beyond the fear. So take the week, give yourself 7 days of truth, 7 days of presence, 7 days of alignment, not because someone told you to, but because you've finally decided to remember who you are. And when you do decide to remember, really remember, you'll begin to realize something even more important. None of this was ever about changing who you are. It was about removing what never belonged. The masks, the layers, the roles you thought you had to play, the constant adjusting, the endless performing, the polite silence. You weren't born for that. You were born to show up fully, to move through life with your eyes open and your heart intact. But somewhere along the way, someone taught you that being real was risky, that being powerful meant being hard, that in order to be loved or respected, you had to become someone else. So you became a version of yourself you could survive inside. But surviving is not the same as living, and certainly not the same as thriving. This is the moment where you remember that the discomfort you feel when you stop pretending is not a signal to retreat. It's the doorway to transformation. It's the gateway to becoming someone who is not only unrecognizable to others, but almost foreign to the parts of you that used to settle. The version of you who tolerated inconsistency, self-abandonment, mediocrity. Those parts begin to dissolve. Not because you hated them, but because you outgrew them. Because love, real love, means growing beyond what no longer supports you. That includes the parts of yourself you've clung to for safety. Power comes when you stop measuring your life by productivity and start measuring it by presence. When you realize that rushing doesn't make you more valuable, that noise doesn't make you more important, that performing doesn't make you more worthy, you begin to choose differently. You start to say yes to rest, to stillness, to real connection. You choose to show up to your own life instead of racing through it. And you know what happens when you do that? You become deeply magnetic. Not because you're trying to be, but because alignment is irresistible. People can feel when someone knows who they are. They feel it in your boundaries, in your speech, in your posture. You don't even have to explain it. Your energy does the talking. And that's what it means to be powerful. It's not about control, it's about congruence. Your inner world matches your outer actions. Your words match your values. Your time matches your priorities. You walk into a room and the room adjusts, not because you demand it, but because you've stopped shrinking. And still there will be moments when you want to go back, when the unfamiliar feels too uncomfortable, when the old identity feels easier. That's normal. The ego doesn't like to die quietly. It likes to bargain. It likes to seduce you with nostalgia. It reminds you how easy it was to be liked when you kept things simple, when you didn't ask for more, when you didn't tell the truth. But ease isn't the goal. Truth is. And truth, real truth, isn't always easy. But it is always liberating. So in this 1 week, as you commit to showing up differently, expect resistance, expect discomfort, expect the internal conflict of a former self wrestling with the emerging one. That's growth. That's what it feels like to become unrecognizable, not just to the world, but to your own patterns. Because the real transformation isn't when others say, you've changed. It's when you look at your own behavior and say, that used to be me, and now it's not. You begin to notice how your voice sounds when it's not filtered through fear. You notice how your decisions feel when they're not made to please everyone. You notice how your body responds when you finally listen to it instead of overriding it. That's embodiment. That's evolution. That's power. And with this new sense of self, you begin to notice something else. You become less reactive. You're not triggered in the same ways. You don't need to defend yourself as much. You're no longer addicted to being right. You no longer participate in conversations that drain your spirit. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you're done betraying yourself just to keep the peace. When you become powerful, your standards change. Your energy becomes sacred. Your time becomes intentional. Your circle becomes smaller but deeper. You no longer chase attention, you cultivate connection. You no longer fight for approval, you stand in your own validation. You stop trying to fix others and instead focus on honoring your own wholeness. That's when everything begins to move in your favor. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer resisting it. You're no longer outsourcing your authority. You are finally home within yourself. People might misunderstand this shift. They might say you've changed, that you've become distant, that you're too focused, that you're different. And they're right. You have changed. You are focused. You are different. Because you've realized that the cost of staying the same was far greater than the fear of changing. You've realized that your peace is more important than your performance, that your truth is more important than your image, that your alignment is more important than their acceptance. So you keep going. You trust yourself more. You listen to your intuition even when it doesn't make sense to others. You make decisions based on integrity, not impulse. You move slower, but with more clarity. You don't explain yourself as much because you realize that being understood is not a prerequisite for being authentic. In this way, 1 week of deep alignment can change everything. Because it reintroduces you to yourself. It rebuilds the muscle of trust in your own voice. It reconnects you with the reason you're here. And that reconnection is the most powerful transformation of all. Because when you remember your purpose, you stop participating in things that distract you from it. You stop tolerating what dishonors it. You begin to build your life around it. And that's when you become someone else. But because you've returned to someone you never gave yourself permission to be. In the beginning, it might feel like loss. You'll grieve the version of yourself that settled, that made things easier for everyone else, that dimmed your light for the comfort of others. But that grief is necessary, it's sacred, it clears space, because you can't carry the weight of who you used to be and become who you're meant to be at the same time. Something has to go, and in this case, it's the need to be small. So you let go, you drop the old stories, the old excuses, the old self-concept that told you were too much or not enough, and in its place you write new ones. Stories that honor your strength, stories that reflect your truth, stories that hold space for your power without apology. Each day, each hour, each moment you show up like this, you become less bound by who you've been and more aligned with who you're becoming. And soon, the habits that felt hard begin to feel normal. The boundaries that once terrified you begin to feel protective. The goals that felt impossible begin to feel inevitable, not because you changed your entire life in a week, but because you decided to live 1 week in full alignment, and that decision changed your life. You stop living reactively and start living responsively. You respond to life from a place of presence. You respond to challenge with curiosity. You respond to discomfort with grace. You're no longer afraid of failure because you're not chasing perfection, you're pursuing growth. You're no longer worried about timelines because you've fallen in love with the process. You're no longer afraid of being seen because you've stopped hiding from yourself. The version of you that lives like this, that moves like this, that thinks like this, that version is powerful beyond measure. And the best part? That version has always been there, waiting, watching, whispering. Every time you ignored your gut, it whispered. Every time you dimmed your light, it waited. Every time you told yourself you weren't ready, it believed in you anyway. Now all you have to do is listen. Not just once, not just for a moment, but for a week. A focused, honest, no excuses week where you refuse to betray yourself, where you stop defaulting to your past and start choosing from your future. Where you wake up each day and decide to embody the version of you that's been trying to rise for years. You don't need a perfect plan, you need presence. You don't need 100 steps, you need the next right one. You don't need to feel certain, you just need to feel ready enough. And if you can do that, if you can stay true to that version of you for 7 days, everything begins to shift. The air feels different, your thoughts sound different, your decisions reflect a higher standard, and the way you carry yourself quietly, confidently, without needing to prove, makes you nearly unrecognizable to those who knew you when you were still doubting, hesitating, hiding. You begin to see through the lens of your power instead of your pain. You begin to lead your own life instead of waiting to be led. You begin to embody the wisdom you once only spoke about. And from that place, everything begins. So when the week ends, what you're left with isn't just a new routine or a few improved habits. It's the unshakable awareness that you are capable of becoming the person you've always known you could be. You've seen what happens when you commit fully, when you act with intention, when you stop hiding from your own potential. That awareness doesn't go away. It becomes the foundation, a new normal. And while the journey doesn't end here, something powerful has begun because you dared to remember who you are, you dared to act like it mattered, and now there's no going back.